Okay. So Dr. Fauci was all over the Sunday shows yesterday, and he gave an hour-long interview with Margaret Brennan on Face the Nation. A few thoughts on this. Well, first of all, when they get to the part when she asks him about gain-of-function research, she says at one point, well, this is a political football, isn't it? I mean, come on. That's the question. That's how you're leading into the question. What is perhaps the most important scientific and public health question out there right now? You're betraying the bias that you think it's a political football when those of us who want to get to the bottom of it don't want taxpayer dollars to fund experimentation with naturally occurring coronaviruses to make them more chimeric on the off chance they might leak out of a lab and kill millions of people. That's not a political football. It is a legitimate question. I digress. She does ask him a good question about why the CDC doesn't have any useful data 2 years into this thing, and he does not have a good answer for that question. At one point, he seems to kind of throw the CDC under the bus and say, well, that's not my job. But then bizarrely, he takes credit for the vaccine. I'm not sure any honest history of Operation Warp Speed is going to give credit to Anthony Fauci for developing the vaccines. But the most interesting and troubling part of this is the fact that he complains that criticism of him is the result of how the coronavirus response has been politicized. He complains in general about the politicization of science, as it were. Well, then he takes a weird political swipe at the senators that are saying accurately he lied to Congress and says, well, how about January 6th? What the heck does that have to do with anything? Here you have the highest paid unelected government employee, highest paid government employee in general, expressing arrogant disdain for senators who have a constitutional obligation to do oversight of the most important question facing the world today without an ounce of humility. And he has the temerity to hit back with a political attack while complaining about politicization. It makes no sense. But I think the even more troubling thing is when he talks about science in general. Here, I'm looking at a quote here. He's responding to this fact that certain senators and members of Congress are criticizing him. And he says, there's a distinct anti-science flavor to this. I'm quoting him now. So if they get up and criticize science, nobody's going to know what they're talking about. But if they get up and they really aim their bullets at Tony Fauci, side note, anyone who refers to themselves in the third person has a problem. He goes on to say, well, people could recognize there's a person there. There's a face. There's a voice you can recognize. You see him on television. So it's easy to criticize, but they're really criticizing science because I represent science. Okay, that's crazy. For at least two reasons. One, this idea that Fauci represents science. The science is settled. Fauci has come down. He's the prophet of science. Very arrogant. But the idea that criticizing science is dangerous misunderstands what science is all about. I would argue the essence of science is self-criticism. The essence of the scientific method is being willing to test your hypotheses, to try and actively disconfirm your working hypotheses. Literally every scientific advancement ever made has been built on skepticism and questioning of the status quo. And usually it's deemed heretical by the status quo scientists at the time, right? Heliocentricity, the idea that the sun is the center of the universe, was considered heresy. And for that heresy, Galileo was prosecuted by the church at the time. Well, now, fast forward to the present day, the church is Fauci. He has a near religious conviction in his own infallibility. And in so doing, he's representing science as some sacrosanct thing that cannot be questioned. Because, of course, he's not interested in science. He's using science as a cudgel with which to shut down debate. That's dangerous. Dr. Fauci. With so many unanswered questions about the origin of this pandemic, that is particularly dangerous.